This is NBC Nightly News, Sunday, August 6th. With Jessica Savage reporting from the NBC News Center in New York. Nightly News is brought to you by Exxon. People working to find and develop new sources of energy for you. Energy for a strong America.
Good evening. Pope Paul VI, the leader of the Roman Catholic Church, died today. He was 80 years old. The Vatican says the Pope died of a heart attack at his summer home in Castel Gandolfo outside Rome. John Chancellor has a special report on the life of the 80-year-old pontiff, but first a report of today's events from Jim Bitterman in Rome.
The Pope suffered a heart attack this afternoon that was complicated by a blood clot in his lungs. It was the blood clot that apparently caused his death. The Pope Paul would have been 81 years old in September. No plans have yet been announced for his funeral. The pontiff has been in frail health for some time now. It was learned only recently that during the kidnapping and murder of his close personal friend Aldo Moro, he had to be given heart stimulants. Earlier in the year, he was bedridden with influenza and viral infections. Just yesterday, the Pope's personal physician ordered the pontiff to bed for a complete rest because of a flare-up in a recurring arthritic condition. It was that problem that kept him from delivering his usual Sunday blessing this morning. Later in the day, the Pope was receiving Mass at his bedside when the heart attack came. After the heart attack, the Vatican Secretary of State, Cardinal Jean Villot, rushed to his bedside. It is Cardinal Villot who will take over the reins of the Church until a papal enclave can be held to choose a new Pope. The Pope's death came at his summer residence, Castel Gandolfo, located just outside of Rome. Earlier in the week, he had made 2 public appearances in small villages around Rome. There had been no sign until yesterday that the Pope's health had been deteriorating. The Pope's death came in an announcement from a Vatican spokesman at 9:44 this evening. For some time now, the Church has been quietly making plans for the passing of Pope Paul. The Pope himself had referred to his approaching death several times lately. Recently, the Church has revised its procedures on the election of a new pontiff. After the Pope's heart attack this afternoon, an inspection was made of the grottos at St. Peter's Basilica where popes are buried. The state radio and television networks here made the brief announcement of the Pope's death this evening and then began playing somber music and a biography of Pope Paul. The Pope will be remembered for a number of things, among them his declarations on human life and his direct involvement in world affairs, most recently his personal plea to members of the Red Brigades to release Aldo Moro. John Chancellor remembers the Pope's life in this report.
He was Giovanni Battista Enrico Antonio Maria Montini, born 3 years before the 20th century began. In this house near the Italian town of Brescia, he was the second of 3 sons of an Italian legislator and well-connected. He became a priest at 23. Pope Pius XI brought him into the Vatican before he had completed his studies. Pius XII made him Archbishop of Milan, and he was the first cardinal named by Pope John. White smoke billowed from the Sistine Chapel chimney on the morning of the 21st of June, 1963. It signaled Montini's election as the 262nd Pope. He chose to be called Paul, after the apostle who had carried Christianity out of the Holy Land and into the Mediterranean world. He was to become the most traveled pontiff in history. His first trip, less than 7 months after his coronation, took him to the Holy Land. In Jordanian Jerusalem, as he walked the Via Dolorosa, excited crowds swept over his small police guard and jammed themselves around him. A lone Vatican guard and 2 American reporters sheltered him and kept him upright. Paul walked the shores of Galilee, where Jesus had called to fishermen, among them Peter, to lay aside their nets and to follow him. Jerusalem, he went into the upper room where Jesus and his disciples had shared their last Passover supper. And he appeared reluctant to leave. Later, at the Mount of Olives, where Jesus wept and prayed the night before he was crucified, Paul met the prince of the Eastern Rite, the Orthodox Patriarch Athenagoras. They embraced, kissed on both cheeks, prayed together, and talked together. For Pope and Patriarch, it was the first meeting in over 500 years. Paul said later that the link between the two churches should never have been broken. He made many trips, this in 1965, to New York to address the United Nations and to celebrate a Mass in Yankee Stadium before 90,000 people. He vigorously ruled his church. His predecessor, Pope John, had called the Vatican Council, but Paul guided its last 3 sessions. And he proclaimed its 16 decrees, statements on social and racial justice, collegiality of bishops, openness toward other Christians and non-Christians, dropping Latin from the Mass, permitting meat on most Fridays, abolishing the index of condemned books, doing away with the written promises that a non-Catholic had to make to marry a Catholic, to raise all children in the Catholic faith, and abolishing excommunication of Catholics who marry outside their church. At the Second World Synod of Bishops in 1969, and these scenes are from that meeting, Paul listened, he was in the room, listened to blunt criticism of the concept of papal authority. And then he approved a program which gave the bishops a share in the church's decision-making through a synod every 2 years. But though he guided his church through many changes, he stood firm against 2 proposed changes: married priests and birth control. He called priestly celibacy a brilliant jewel and kept it mandatory. And he condemned and formally banned the birth control pill and all other contraceptives. He said, "The church teaches that each and every marriage act must remain open to the transmission of life." Millions of Catholics, including priests and bishops, let him know they considered him wrong, but he did not change. In the uproar that followed, he often pleaded with his critics to submit to his authority, but he did not, as popes before him had, order them to keep silent. Paul VI, pastor and pope, a gentle and caring man who gave aid to the poor and who pleaded with the powerful for peace and social justice. Prince of his church for many years.
For a strong America.
Next time you drive into an Exxon station, take a close look behind some of our signs, and you may meet some of the people who bring you the products and services that keep you coming back. Behind the sign over our pumps are Exxon people like A.B. Lewis. His job is to find the oil you need, and he's doing it in the middle of a pine forest in East Texas. Behind the sign on our Uniflow motor oil are people like Wilderine James. You can thank them for perfecting a motor oil that conserves gasoline and saves you money. Behind this sign are the sales representatives like David Rivette, who help keep Exxon dealers up to date on how to keep your car up to date. And behind this sign are geologists, tanker captains, engineers, transport drivers, all the rest of the people at Exxon whose job is to find, develop, and supply more energy for a strong America.
Arthritis sufferers, when minor pain strikes, doctors recommend one medicine more than any other. It's in Arthritis Pain Formula, the arthritis specialist. Look, for painful joints, compare ordinary headache tablets to Arthritis Pain Formula. APF has 50% more pain medicine. Relief lasts for hours. And 2 buffers help protect your stomach. Get the one pain reliever doctors recommend most. It's in Arthritis Pain Formula, the arthritis specialist.
Again, with the death of Pope Paul, the Vatican Secretary of State, Cardinal Jean Villot, temporarily heads the Roman Catholic Church. We have another report now from Jim Bitterman in Rome on the selection process for a new pope.
What will happen next is a gathering of the College of Cardinals. In the next 9 days, they will assemble here in Rome to hold a conclave, a kind of convention to determine who is to be the next pope. The rules for the conclave are complicated, but basically and ordinarily it comes down to a vote. Pope Paul himself made some changes in the procedures before his death. At this papal conclave, there will be tighter security and electronic monitoring of the gathering. How soon before there is a new pope depends entirely upon how long it takes for the cardinals to come to some sort of an agreement. 2/3 of the cardinals must agree on the same person. Jessica?
Thank you, Jim. Announcement of the death of Pope Paul prompted many prayer services in cities around the world. We have now these 3 reports.
In Washington, less than an hour after the Pope's death was announced, there was a special Mass for his soul at the National Shrine of the Immaculate Conception. Many of these people were on their way to church when they heard the news on their car radios. More people attended the 4:30 Mass than usually do. Monsignor Eugene Bilski said Paul was a pope of vision and hope.
Here was a man who gave himself, who in fact accepted the invitation of God to live a life of faith. He lived in the presence of Christ, who called him to love unselfishly, and he loved to the end.
Later, Monsignor Bilski called upon the congregation to pray for guidance during the days of transition. Bob Kerr, NBC News, Washington.
The news of the Pope's death was announced at St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York at an afternoon Mass.
We have lost our Pope. Pope Paul VI died this afternoon after suffering a heart attack. God our Father, your reward all will be leaving you. May your servant, Pope Paul, or a vicar of Peter, or shepherd of your church.
The announcement was made just moments after the Pope had died, and those attending the Mass looked solemn, saddened. Pope Paul visited St. Patrick's when he was in New York in 1965. He was the first pope to visit the Americas, and there is a bust of the late pontiff in the church. This afternoon, parishioners were lighting candles and offering prayers for Paul. Later, Cardinal Terence Cook of New York came to St. Patrick's to offer his own prayers.
We thank God for the gift of his saintly, courageous, priestly life in our midst in difficult times. As the faithful successor of St. Peter, he not only guided the Vatican Council to a happy conclusion, but also worked and prayed to bring about the spiritual renewal of the Church in the service of mankind. With understanding, patience, and compassion, he served as an instrument of reconciliation and a visible center of our unity in faith and love.
Cardinal Cook said Paul would be remembered in history as the Pope of peace and justice. Brian Ross, NBC News, New York.
People began gathering at Catholic churches throughout the Chicago area shortly after the Pope's death was announced. There are more than 2.5 million Roman Catholics here, the largest Catholic archdiocese in the nation. Its administrator is John Cardinal Cody, who was a personal friend of the Pope. He was asked what the Pope will be remembered for.
To describe a life like his, a pontificate of 15 years, and to say just what he would best be remembered for would be very difficult. I suppose that everyone would think, and surely the death of his very good friend Mauro must have helped to bring on his end. I suppose it was his suffering at seeing Italy so changed. And perhaps he will best be remembered for his great efforts to bring about peace and understanding.
The Mass of the Resurrection and other special prayer services for the Pope have begun. Al Johnson, NBC News, Chicago.
The body of Pope Paul was brought back to Rome tonight from Castel Gandolfo. It will lie in state in St. Peter's Church, where a memorial mass will be sung tomorrow night. At the White House, President Carter said, quote, during his 15 years as pontiff, the voice of Paul VI served as a clear memorial beacon to a troubled world. With his passing, we have all been deprived of a strong voice for reason, for moderation, and for peace.
Art Linkletter here with the Unity card that can double your buying power and get you the things you really want, like this, or this. Here at Unity, there are over 10,000 nationally advertised products at savings of up to 50%. You save because Unity buys in huge quantities for over 1 million smart consumers. Your Unity card is coming by mail with details on how to start saving. So watch your mail and double your buying power the Unity way.
Energy for a stronger America.
To Exxon geologists, these remote canyon landscapes aren't just scenery. They're clues to where uranium may be found. Drilling, studying rocks, and probing for radioactivity help us find the uranium that may someday provide electricity for your home. Right now, hundreds of geologists are leading Exxon's search for new deposits of uranium and other forms of energy. Energy for you and energy for a strong America.
Come on in, Thurman.
What's the problem? I'm playing good ball.
You certainly are. In my opinion, Thurman Munson's the finest catcher in the game. The problem is you're not shaving.
I do shave. It must be my electric razor.
Maybe it's not your razor. It's your beard. It just lays there. Get it to stand up with Williams Electric Shave. The razor will shave closer, cleaner, with less irritation.
I'm going to use electric shave. It'll be the best looking catcher in the game. Well, one of the best.
There was other news today. Secretary of State Cyrus Vance talked for 4.5 hours with Israeli Prime Minister Menachem Begin. Richard Valeriani reports from Jerusalem.
Secretary Vance went to the Prime Minister's office to confer alone with Begin before meeting with the full cabinet. He delivered a letter from President Carter, reportedly urging Begin to do what he could to keep the negotiating process alive. The agenda for today's discussions included the touchy situation in Lebanon, as well as Arab-Israeli negotiations. The question of a summit meeting involving Begin, Carter, and President Sadat did not come up, but the Israeli Prime Minister was asked about that anyway. Would you accept, sir?
Well, I suppose that for the time being I will stand by my first reply, because the question itself is hypothetical. But I would consider it with great seriousness.
Do you think that such a venture might be necessary to revive the talks?
My dear friends, you ask me very clever questions, and I'm not in a position to give you clever answers.
Vance later went to the Prime Minister's residence to continue the talks, which lasted 4.5 hours and which both men described as very serious and useful. But if there was anything new in the Israeli position, neither man made any reference to it. Vance declined to discuss any details of the talks.
I have indicated that I am not going to say anything about any of the discussions that I have with either the Prime Minister or President Sadat insofar as any of the details of the conversation are concerned, and I'm going to stick to that.
Vance is meeting here tomorrow again with Prime Minister Begin before flying on to Alexandria for talks with President Sadat. After those talks are completed, Vance is returning to Washington to confer with President Carter. And not until then will the United States determine what the next step should be in Middle East diplomacy. Richard Valeriani, NBC News, in Jerusalem.
Rescuers in Eastman, Quebec are still looking for bodies victims of yesterday's bus accident. 41 people aged 14 to 72, many of them handicapped, were on board the bus when it plunged into a lake. Lee McCarthy reports.
The bus was pulled from the lake at 4 o'clock this morning. It had been towed through 11 feet of mud. There were 37 bodies inside. By dawn, the bodies had been removed and placed on the shore. 2 bodies were still missing, so police dragged the lake but did not find them. A nun from Asbestos, the home of all the victims, tentatively identified them. One by one, they were put into a temporary morgue, a tractor-trailer truck. The bodies were taken to a funeral home in nearby Waterloo, Quebec, where this afternoon the relatives of the victims began the sad, grim task of making positive identifications. A morgue had been prepared in the funeral home garage. 41 white sheets set out to cover the bodies. Relatives arrived in Waterloo all afternoon. Floral tributes began arriving. Because a formal investigation of the accident will be held, autopsies of the victims had been expected. But the coroner said after the bodies were identified, they would be released for burial. The busload of mentally and physically handicapped residents had started from the Asbestos Community Center Friday. Today, it was being turned into a morgue. All 41 caskets will be brought here. A mass for the victims was said in Asbestos. A priest who survived the accident conducted the mass, and some of the survivors attended. The 9,000 people of this mining town are still in shock. This evening, funeral arrangements are not certain. Lee McCarthy, NBC News, Quebec, Canada.
A man with what turned out to be a toy pistol hijacked a jetliner bound from Amsterdam to Madrid. The man wanted to go to Algeria. 3 passengers and a stewardess overpowered the hijacker, and the plane landed safely in Barcelona. On this, the 33rd anniversary of the bombing of Hiroshima, 9 people protesting the neutron bomb were arrested for speaking out during a Washington church service attended by President Carter. A shortage of liquid helium at Cape Canaveral, Florida, will delay the launch of an unmanned spacecraft headed for Venus. The Pioneer craft is now set to go early Tuesday instead of Monday. At least 5 people were killed and more than 40 wounded by Syrian shelling of the Christian sector of Beirut. 12-day-old Louise Brown, the first baby conceived outside the mother's womb, left the hospital with her mother in Oldham, England. Doctors said both of them doing just fine.
Which perfectly good cook could ruin a perfectly good dish? They're both using the same recipe, but there's one big difference. Watch the cook on the left. She's using long cooking rice. And this time, it's turned out sticky. That's going to ruin the whole dish. Meanwhile, minute rice has turned out perfect, as always, because it's foolproof. It can't overcook or undercook, and that helps make a perfect dish. Minute rice, because how can you have a perfect rice dish without perfect rice?
I see you've got new neighbors. Hi.
You Cora?
None but. Stop by the store later.
Good coffee. Your mom's used Maxwell House for years.
Figures. Something works, you stick with it. I think Maxwell House tastes best.
Only kind you sell.
When something works, you stick with it. Here. Nicest housewarming gift I know.
Maxwell House coffee. Every Maxwell House coffee, good to the last drop.
How does America spell relief?
In Detroit, for heartburn, we spell relief R-O-L-A-I-D-S.
Rolaids spells relief. In this test with Rolaids active ingredient, laboratory acid changes color to prove Rolaids consumes 47 times its weight in excess stomach acid. How does America spell relief?
In Albuquerque, for gas or acid indigestion, we spell it R-O-L-A-I-D-S.
All over America, Rolaids spells relief.
There is a general political primary in Georgia next Tuesday, and most of the interest is in the 6th Congressional District, where the former wife of Senator Herman Talmadge is running for Congress. Kenley Jones has this report.
Not only is Talmadge one of the best-known names in Georgia politics, but in country-cured hams as well. For years, Betty Talmadge looked after the ham business, while her husband, Senator Herman Talmadge, looked after politics. The The two lived together in this Gone with the Wind style mansion south of Atlanta. But last year, the marriage ended in a bitter divorce, and the senator moved out. Mrs. Talmadge still lives in the mansion. She's still running her meat business, and now she's also running for Congress in Georgia's 6th district.
I got a good chance to go to Congress, but I need your help. Oh, all right.
She is banking on the Talmadge name recognition to help her at the polls against her principal opponents, State Senator Peter Banks and State Senator Virginia Shepard. One of Mrs. Talmadge's campaign arguments is that her name would be an asset in Washington.
I have lived in Washington for 21 years. I do know people that are in positions to influence change. Now, I'm not suggesting that they're going to, agree with everything I say, but at least when I call them up, they won't say Betty who.
Ironically, the Talmadge divorce, which prompted Mrs. Talmadge to seek a new career in politics, has cast a shadow over the senator's longtime political career. As a result of court proceedings involving disputed property rights, investigations have begun into the senator's financial dealings, including his campaign spending and his tax returns. The senator has a loyal following at home, and Mrs. Talmadge is concerned that the adverse publicity surrounding the divorce may backfire against her on Election Day.
Yes, but if you wait in life until everything's perfect, then you don't do anything. You have to take an opportunity when it comes. I would have rather it came next year. But it didn't come next year, it came this year.
The senator has had no comment on his former wife's candidacy, since they both still live in the 6th district. If Mrs. Talmadge wins the election, she will become her former husband's congresswoman. Ken Lee Jones, NBC News, Lovejoy, Georgia.
NBC News will have a special program tonight on the death of Pope Paul at 11:30 p.m. Eastern Time. And that is our report tonight. John Hart will join David Brinkley here tomorrow. I'm Jessica Savage. Thank you, and good night from all of us at NBC News.
Energy for a stronger America.
Exxon is launching a new era to find more energy from farther and farther below the sea. Off the coast of California, Exxon launched the world's tallest offshore production platform, the first structure of its kind to open America's really deep waters as a source of oil and natural gas. In the North Sea, Exxon and another company launched one of the world's first concrete and steel production platforms, a rugged giant that's now hard at work in these deep and punishing waters. Off the coast of Louisiana, Exxon launched a prototype of a unique submerged production system, an unmanned system that's capable of doing its job on the seafloor in waters that are even too deep for the huge platforms we've already built. Taller, stronger, deeper. As the search for offshore oil goes on, Exxon will continue to pioneer the technology we need to get the energy we need. Energy for a strong America.
Mike Connors of Mannix is back in a special police story movie. He's a cop who's been a hero, now in the grip of a crippling fear.
Daddy! Please let me in. I just can't go back to work.
Mike Connors and Martin Milner star in Stigma, a 2-hour police story movie on The Big Event, tonight at 9, 8 Central Time on NBC.
Celebrating Mickey Mouse's birthday with Disney character placemats for the kids. Order a medium Pepsi for 59 cents and take home a placemat.
Look, Pluto and Goofy.
4 mats in all, one each week during August at participating Hardee's. It's our way to say, happy birthday, Mickey.
Keeping a marriage together has never been easy, but today it seems to be getting harder. On the next Donahue, we'll talk about why that is with an entire audience of couples who have participated in the Marriage Encounter